welcome back to Based On. That's what we decided, right?
Yes,
okay.
Based On. Firmly set.
Firmly set. Okay. Well.
Yeah. Well, tonight, or this episode, we're going to be talking about Heart of Darkness, and as the source material, and the movie that was made after it, or that it's based on, is Apocalypse Now. So when I'd heard of Heart of Darkness, I had not read it, but I had no idea that that's what Apocalypse Now was based on. I had heard of both of them independently, did not know that they were
very much the same. I had heard a lot less about Heart of Darkness. I think the first time I remember hearing about it was, I can't remember his name, but an author based out of Kenya talking about how it was his favorite book until he realized that the savages the book was talking about was the people that he was, should be relating to. And anyway, gosh, I can't remember his name. Ngugi Wu Thiong'o. I butchered that name, but that is where I first heard about Heart of Darkness. And I mean, Apocalypse Now is probably one of the most famous movies out there.
Yeah.
And probably one of the most talked about movies out there.
You hear a lot about it.
Definitely.
A lot about it. But I hadn't seen it until we decided to do this episode. So that was way late. Way late to the party.
Way late to the party. We were born late to the party, but
yes,
it
true.
took us a few decades to even get the party started.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's jump into Heart of Darkness. The brief little summary.
Yeah, we'll try to keep it brief.
Yeah, if you've read it, it's pretty short, but it's also fairly dense. So our story starts off with, I believe it's 5 people on a boat on the River Thames, and they're sitting around waiting for dawn to get their trip started. And the main narrator is sitting around just observing people on the boat, and he observes that one of the companions, Marlowe, is, I think it's like a nut that he's like trying to crack. And he says that Marlowe's stories are much like him trying to crack that nut. Like, yeah, there's an outer shell, but there's also this inner working that you really want to get to. And Marlowe is the person who tells most of the story, even though he's not the main narrator. We'll kind of go into that in a little bit. But Marlowe tells a story about how he traveled to Africa to work for a company based out of Belgium. And this company was mainly exporting ivory back to Europe out of Belgium. It's set during the colonial imperialism era where a lot of atrocities are going on, and he goes into how he got started with the company. His aunt knew someone on the board of directors, or I don't even know if that's what it actually calls it.
Something like that, though.
The modern day equivalent would be board of directors. And they send him to this place in the Congo, and when he gets there, all these people he sees a lot of the natives to the area doing back-breaking work that he points out is absolutely pointless, what they're doing. Like, I think they're trying to destroy a cliff that it serves no purpose to destroy that cliff. And then some of them are digging a hole for the sole purpose to like fill it back up again or something. And so when he gets there, they give him his orders, and I believe it's when he first gets there, he hears about Kurtz right there.
Yeah.
So if you want to take over.
Yeah. So his orders are basically to go and extract this Kurtz character that he's only heard of up to this point. Kurtz is kind of high up in the company, and he's having great success exporting ivory, to the point that he's sending out as much ivory as like the rest of the group combined of these ivory exporters. And people higher up in the company, or probably his contemporaries as well, are concerned that he's going to just take their job, basically, because he's so efficient. So his orders are to go in and extract Kurtz.
Part of that is due to, there's a lot of talk of Kurt's being ill.
Yes.
That he's contracted some sort of illness in the jungle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so the main character, he overhears some nefarious conversation between two of the other people, and that's kind of how he learns that there's this competition between Kurtz and other ivory exporters. So he sets out on this voyage up the river, the Congo River.
I don't know if it specifically says the river, but well, from that first station, he has like a 200-mile track on land.
Oh yes.
And during that, one of the white guys gets sick, and so they make some of the natives carry him. And over the course of that trip, they quickly abandon the trek because they're like, we're sick and tired of carrying this sick guy for you, which don't blame them.
Yeah.
And so, and then when they get to there, he finds out that the ship he was supposed to have was busted up.
Yes, it had crashed, got damaged.
And I think it's not immediately when he finds out, but later on he kind of suspects that they purposely crashed it to delay him from getting to Kurtz so that Kurtz can't get back safely in health.
Yeah. So eventually he does get the boat fixed and they start up on this journey on a big river. And then the large proportion of the book is them on the boat. It's him, a couple other Europeans, and then a lot of the native Congolese. The interesting thing to keep in mind as you read the book is, who's the author?
Joseph Conrad.
Joseph Conrad, thank you. So Conrad wrote it in the time that these things were happening. He wrote it during the time period where everyone was exploiting natives, not just in Africa, but all over, and not just people from Belgium were going over to Africa and exploiting people and colonizing and all of that. But so he writes it. His character sees things through the lens of the prevailing theory or the prevailing thought process of that time. So, you know, they didn't see the native Africans as equal with them in humanity or worth, really.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing that makes this more than just an adventure story into the middle of Africa is that the main character's mindset starts shifting and he starts to see the humanity in the natives, in the Congolese, and he starts seeing them differently while some of the other Europeans do not.
He also starts see's a lot of his fellow Europeans as much more savage as the journey continues.
Yes.
I don't know if he's on the same level as the Europeans when he first starts, though, because he's the one that like sarcastically points out that everything they're doing in that first station is pointless, and he there's some sarcastic lines that he throws in there. I'll see if okay, so he says there's the philanthropic desire of giving the criminals something to do, which he shortly afterwards he recognizes that they're not criminals and that these philanthropic ideals are not necessary, and that it's something that all the Europeans are telling themselves to make themselves feel better about the horrible stuff they're doing, pretty much. So yeah, he starts off a little bit more in the middle ground, and then kind of has I think he stays more in the middle ground, being kind of critical of both sides, but a better understanding of what he's being critical about as the journey continues.
Yeah, and without getting into too much of the history of what was going on at the time, the Belgians were quite brutal to the Congolese. They would, I mean, we already mentioned the mindless work they would have them do, or the back-breaking work, but if they didn't meet quotas and didn't get enough ivory or rubber or whatever they were working on, they would just start cutting hands or feet off of these people. So it was a very brutal time, but that's not really, I don't know, just a little bit of context in the story.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, there's the Kurtz character who everyone's always talking about how great he is, and but depending on who's talking about it, there's kind of this like resentment towards how great he is, or this reverence towards it. And Marlowe, the guy journeying up the river, starts becoming obsessed with Kurtz, and he talks about how there's a point where the fellow members on the crew are saying there's no way Kurtz is still alive after they've been attacked by some of the people on the sides of the river with bows and arrows. And after that happens, a bunch of the crew says there's no way Kurtz is still alive. And Marlowe talks about how he's suddenly very sad because he realizes he's never going to hear Kurt's voice. And over the course of him journeying up the river, there's a lot of this, I want to hear Kurt's voice. I want to hear what this man has to say. And even before you see him, his voice has this overbearing presence, which is really cool.
Yeah. Marlowe just forms this infatuation with Kurtz, and he's never met him, never seen him, never heard him. But yeah, Kurtz's voice, without ever speaking, is a prominent part of the story, and he, as a character, is very prominent as well. But he doesn't come into the story until the very, very end, really.
So they're journeying up this river, and they have a lot of run-ins with various different tribal groups in that area, and then a lot of trouble, just going up the river itself. And at some point they find an abandoned hut where he finds a seaman's log and a bunch of piled up logs that says, this is fuel, keep going up the river. I can't remember if it's like, we'll see you soon kind of thing.
Yeah.
But so they keep journeying up the river, and they finally get to where Kurtz has been stationed. And there they meet a Russian, someone who also worked for the company, who was a Russian. And those same two guys that were bad-mouthing Kurtz, and Marlowe overhears them, also was talking about this Russian guy. And they came up with this plan to hang him if they ever saw him again. And they're kind of flippant about it, which is kind of the scary part of it all. And so they meet this Russian, and he's described as having like this patchwork suit. And the Russian's been staying with Kurtz for, I don't even know how long, a very long time, and he's become obsessed with Kurtz. And he talks about how Kurtz will open your mind, and just talking with him makes you rethink the way you look at the world and all this stuff. And so obviously Marlowe gets more excited to see Kurtz, except for when we finally do meet Kurtz, he's sickly, he's basically on death's doorstep.
Yes, on his way to death.
And so his station actually doesn't have any other Europeans besides him and the Russian, I believe. If there is, they don't really mention it. Everyone else helping him gather the ivory and helping around the station are people native to that area that he's befriended, and they have a very high reverence for Kurtz.
Yes.
And they, I believe it's 4 of them are guarding him with guns, basically trying to stop Marlowe from taking him, because I don't want to say they're treating him like a god, but
kind of. There's like kind of a godlike reverence to him, and he's definitely not discouraging that kind of reverence and respect.
No, definitely not. So eventually Marlowe is able to get Kurtz onto his boat, and they start making their way down the river. And shortly afterwards, Kurtz, he has his only conversation with Kurtz there, really. And, the last words he says are the horror, and then he dies shortly afterwards. And from there, it kind of just does a brief summary of Marlowe getting back to Europe. And it says when he gets back to Europe, he's kind of sickened by how everyone there is living, and how they're so focused on just getting a few pennies for beer and food, and just living normal lives when they have no idea what's going on outside of their daily lives.
And he realizes as well that they're the uncivilized. They're not any more civilized than the uncivilized of Africa. Man, that was hard. They're just have the appearance of it.
Yes, they're much better at making it seem like they're doing the right thing, when in reality they're basically, the criticism is that both of them are people, and they're both privy to the dark side that any human being is capable of committing. And so he has Kurtz's paper that documents everything that Kurtz did, because Kurtz handed it to him before he died. And while he's there, a few different people show up asking him for the papers, and he's able to, like, one of them's a straight up company man, just says, hey, we need these, and he basically says, no, you don't. I know you don't need these. Like, these are my property to do with what I want. And then they send someone else who tries to, I think he says he's like Kurtz's cousin or something like that, and he's able to see through it. And then a third man shows up, and I think he's a journalist, right?
Yes.
And so basically he talks with him, and he decides to give the papers to Kurtz's fiance that's been in Europe the whole time. And when he talks to her, she says, you know, you must have been really great for your Kurtz to have trusted you with this stuff. And they have a brief conversation about, again, how great Kurtz is. And she asked what his last words were, and Marlowe decides to tell her that his last words were her name, basically as like, you're not ready to handle.
Yeah.
You don't need to know all the terrible stuff that your fiance went through right before he died. And then that story ends, and the whole story ends with them back on that first boat in England, and the sun coming up, and them getting ready to set on whatever journey the five of them that were on the original boat go off to.
Yeah, I found that the way that Conrad decided to tell the story was quite interesting, in that the five people on the boat in the original, like when the story starts, have nothing to do with the story. They're just people on the boat, and it's only the one, Marlowe, that's actually in the story that goes into the heart, as it were. So I thought that was interesting, and I wondered on, like, if Conrad could have just told it like as it was happening, more first person.
Probably. So, have you ever read anything by H.G. Wells?
Just War of the Worlds.
Okay. So that's like the one story that would not.
Of course.
But so for his story, The Time Machine, he writes it as if he's a journalist reporting a story that a friend told him. And him and Joseph Conrad were contemporaries, and I believe they were actually close friends. And so I kind of wondered if that was part of the style, or if Joseph Conrad was influenced by Wells, or vice versa. You know, obviously either way is possible.
Yeah.
But the way that Conrad wrote it here, with the narrator outside of the story, it provides a chance to kind of have like an outside commentary that you wouldn't have had before.
Yeah, he could tell things about the story that he wouldn't have known at the time, but looking back, he knows. Yeah. So it was an interesting, just an interesting style of writing and a way to tell a story.
There's one part, so a very important part that we didn't really talk about, is when they're attacked by that tribe with the bows and arrows. One of the locals that's on the boat with him dies, and he actually was having a very close relationship with that guy over the course of their journey. I think it was the guy that he talked to the most. Yeah. And so he's extremely saddened by it, but they end up having to throw the guy's body overboard and just kind of move on. And as he's telling that point in the story where he's talking about how he had to go change his clothes because he got the guy's blood on him, it pops out of the story onto the boat for a second, and one of the people on the boat is like, you're making this up, like there's no way this happened. And he says, like, you might not believe it because you've never been in that situation, but this is exactly what happened. And I think he kind of used that character as like, I know the audience might not be with me, but
this is happening.
Yeah, this is happening. And it's very interesting. Outside of Wells and this book, I don't think I can think of another one where you have a narrator who's just basically talking about the story.
Telling the story to other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure it's happened.
I'm sure it has, but
I can't think of any either. Yeah. Well, if you think of any, put them in the comments.
Please do.
So you read the book first.
Yes.
Yes. You hadn't. Neither of us had seen it, and neither of us had read it.
Right.
Nice. Okay, but you read the book first. So, as you were reading, what did you see in the book that you thought, like, this for sure has to be in the movie?
So, part of the problem with that one, with comparing these two, I knew we were going to be watching Apocalypse Now, and I knew Apocalypse Now was about Vietnam.
Yes.
And so, as I was reading that, I was just constantly asking myself, I was like, how in the hell do you make this about Vietnam? Like, I couldn't see how you would do that. It wasn't a very clear answer for me. I knew it would have to be a journey of some sorts, because like the journey is the book. The destination is such a rushed part of it that, not to sound like a junior high motivational poster, but it's about the journey, not the destination.
It truly is, though, in this story.
And so I didn't think it would be on a boat as much of the movie is, but I knew it would have to be either them on foot or something journeying to a specific point up ahead. One thing I thought about is how, like I was saying, Kurt's voice is so prevalent throughout the book. They have to show that somehow. Yeah. And so I was just assuming that there would be a ton of voiceover from the guy that played Kurtz before we even see him. I've seen that shot from the movie where Marlon Brando is just staring straight up and like you can only see his face. I thought that would be superimposed over something that was happening with everyone else. But we'll get into the movie itself. Jeez. So, yeah, it's kind of a tough one with this just because I wasn't in the mindset of like, well, this definitely is going to be in the book, because it was more like, how is any of this going to be in the movie at all? So that was my big question, really. Yeah. But after having seen the movie, I would say one thing that I felt was necessary is the stuff outside of the Congo, the stuff that happened. Not necessarily the 5 people on the boat, but an equivalent to him being in Europe before he makes it to Congo, and the post-trip section. I definitely thought there would be a scene with Kurtz's widow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But there wasn't. That's interesting.
More on that later.
Yes, we will talk more about the movie, but trying to focus on the story here.
So I guess what surprised you what in the book surprised you that was in the book?
So I was kind of in the same position. I knew that the book took place in the Congo, and I knew that the movie was in Vietnam. So I had kind of the same feelings as you, and one of the things was the ending. I thought that there would be a scene. Well, no, because I'm trying to. So I was on a trip, so I read like 15 or 20 pages of the story, and then watched the movie, and then finished it. So it's kind of I cheated a little bit with this. But I was kind of,
shame.
I know, I'm sorry.
Shame.
I was kind of thrown, I was a little bit lost in the movie when I was watching it the first time. Because I just didn't feel the I don't know. I didn't feel the
coherence.
Yes, the coherence. I didn't feel like the purpose of the story, other than just a story up a river to find some dude. I felt like it was a cool story. I guess they were going on an adventure per se, kind of a terrible adventure. But as I was watching the movie, I was just like, this is just kind of all weird. I didn't really get where it was going. And I mean, the first 15 or 20 pages of the story, of Joseph Conrad's story, it doesn't really get into it yet. I just knew just the characters, and that was it.
See, and I think when you're reading the book, it's not a very clear, like, this is what we're going and this is what we're, like, it's not a very objective-oriented story. It may sound like it is, because there's you're going to go get Kurtz and you're going to bring him back, but I think that actual objective doesn't get clearly defined. They talk about it, but his thoughts isn't about getting Kurtz and bringing him back. His thoughts are so much on meeting Kurtz.
Yes, just meeting him.
That very objective kind of gets muddled over the course of the story.
Yes, and as I watched the movie, the objective in the movie, to kind of jump onto our next section a little bit, just about the movie. The objective in the movie is to go and take out Kurtz, to eliminate him, right? So that's what I saw when I watched the movie, and then I was surprised in the book when the objective was a little different. Actually, a lot different, obviously. But so that's where kind of some things didn't really line up for me. But I watched the movie and then read it and then watched it again with you.
Yeah.
When you were watching it for the first time. And I will say my second go around, the movie meant a lot more, and I was able to keep it in line. Do
you think that's because you were watching the movie a second time, or because you had the source material backing you up, or both?
I think it was probably a combination of both. But I mean, even just watching the movie again without reading it, I think there would have been some more clarity seeing it as a whole.
Yeah.
But I guess it kind of adds to the story. I mean, in the movie, the characters don't know what's coming. I mean, they know an objective, which is actually outside of where it was legal for them to be, because they were there in Vietnam, and he was actually technically outside. Anyway,
we'll get into that.
Yeah. So as when I could see it and remember the first time I watched it as a whole, it cleared things up quite a bit.
Cool. All right. So I know last time we did our hypothetical before we went into the movie, just because of how different they are. I think we're gonna go into the movie first on this one. So if you want to kick us off, since you did watch the movie first.
Yeah, mostly.
And I've seen it twice.
Yes, I have seen it twice. So the movie, Apocalypse Now, was directed by Francis Ford Coppola.
He directed the Godfather movies.
Yes, a very prominent, very prolific director. That being said, I think this is the first and possibly only Francis Ford Coppola movie I've seen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I haven't seen The Godfathers. I may have seen one of his without knowing it, but to my knowledge, this is the first.
What else has he directed besides The Godfather? I know there's something else.
I know it's a bunch. He's a big deal. We can tell you right quick.
The Conversation.
Yes, The Conversation.
Have you ever seen that?
Nope.
It's really good.
Okay.
Outside of the third Godfather, I can't think of any movie he's made that hasn't been absolutely necessary viewing for people. If you've seen the third Godfather, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I have not seen it, but I've heard certain things. Oh, he did do Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Oh.
As well.
Was he a director or just a producer on that one?
I think director. I clicked on director.
There we go.
Yeah. So, anyway, he's a big deal as far as directors go in the movie biz.
Yes.
And whatnot.
Fun fact, I guess, it originally wasn't supposed to be Coppola who directed it.
Oh.
So he was going to produce it, and George Lucas, Star Wars George Lucas, was going to direct it. And from what I understand, it was much closer to the source material. It was still based in Vietnam, but there was a lot more similarities to the source material. Okay. Apparently, George Lucas and Coppola had a huge falling out over making this specifically, and partially because I think Lucas had started episode 4, like directing episode 4, right when Coppola got the money for it. And so there was a bit of a falling out between them, and Coppola decided to direct it, and I think we're all the better for it.
Probably, although I'm sure there were more than once he regretted that. This movie ended up taking, 2 years?
3
years to make, and it was supposed to just be a normal amount of time.
It was supposed to be a 5-month shoot. It turned into them being in the Philippines for years, and the way that they filmed back then, they had the actual reels, and they had to send it back to California because there was nowhere in the Philippines that could safely store the reels. So Coppola was stuck in the Philippines for years, not seeing any of the footage that he'd filmed until he got back to California, and then they spent a whole year just editing this movie.
I think there were 4 or 5 editors,
and there was over 200 hours of footage.
Yeah, I saw 240 hours of footage they had to try to condense down into a movie length. So it ended up being, there's a whole documentary actually about the making of this movie.
It's called Hearts of Darkness. We both tried to track it down, just weren't able to get a hold of it. Yeah. I saw some stuff from it, but this movie is not only famous as the movie itself, but the making of it is historically brutal.
Yes, it's almost as famous as the movie.
Yes.
So
I think some people actually argue that Hearts of Darkness, the documentary about Apocalypse Now, is actually better than Apocalypse Now. I haven't seen it, so I'm not going to comment on that argument.
But I do want to see it because it sounds like pure madness. And man. Anyway.
Part of that madness is the cast.
Yes, the cast. It's quite a cast, really. They've got some big names, but obviously with it being, from it was made in 1979.
Well, it came out in 79.
Yeah,
so
it came out
started
in
1976, I think, is when they started filming.
So before either of us were born.
Definitely.
Yeah, by a long shot. Not that long. But, so Marlon Brando is in it, and the first little tidbit is this, and he's Kurtz. Kurtz is supposed to have been stranded in the Filipino or Vietnam jungle for months, and he was supposed to be
kind of emaciated.
Thin, yeah, but Marlon Brando came to set 80-ish pounds.
I think the official was 88
pounds overweight. So that was the first thing, and he for some reason decided that he wasn't going to read the source material, he wasn't going to read the script, he wasn't going to care at all.
Yeah, they paid him, I think it was $1 million up front just to show up, and when he showed up, the overweight, not having any of his lines ready, most actors, that would mean you lost your paycheck. Brando said, well, if you fire me, I'm just going to keep that $1 million. Which the budget for this, Coppola actually had to mortgage his house and his personal wine vineyard to make this movie, so they weren't about to just fork over $1 million for someone to show up and goof off.
Yeah, and he was, I think in his contract, it was either 2 or 3 weeks that it was in his contract, and if he went over that, it was a very extensive extension fee they would have had to pay Marlon Brando. So
yeah,
that in and of itself added to this already hellish adventure, making this movie. Martin Sheen is
Willard, which is the equivalent to Marlowe in the book.
Yes.
I don't know why they changed that.
I don't know why either.
Of all the things they changed, that's odd to me.
Yeah, I don't know why they wouldn't keep the name the same, but he does a great job. I saw an interview with him where Francis Ford Coppola really helped his career by giving him this shot. He wasn't very old. He wasn't super established yet in Hollywood as a big name actor, and this movie really helped him to, get his career really cooking. Robert Duvall.
Oh,
sorry.
Since we went into the horrors of Brando, we can go into the horrors of Sheen for a moment. I think he was just barely recovering from being a hard alcoholic.
Yes.
In fact, the opening scene, he told them to keep filming because he was dealing with some personal stuff and he felt like it would be good for the movie, and it
was. It's kind of a strange, weird opening to this movie.
Yes.
That was the first thing that threw me for a loop. When comparing the book to the movie, what's happening right now? Anyway.
He also had a heart attack. He was 36 while filming this, and he had a heart attack while on set. And Coppola was so paranoid that this would sink the movie if news got out that Sheen had a heart attack. And I heard Sheen didn't want word to get out either. So they kept it hidden and just basically kept on filming like the day he had it. And yeah. Freaking craziness.
Yes, crazy. So Robert Duvall, we won't go through the whole cast list, but just some of the bigger names. Harrison Ford has a small role.
Very small.
Yeah. Dennis Hopper, which I don't know too much that he's in. He's in Speed.
He always plays a pretty good bad guy.
Yeah, and he's a bit eccentric in this, which we'll talk about a little bit when we get into it. But the one that might throw you for a loop, Lawrence Fishburne is in this movie.
Morpheus.
Yes, except that he's like 18.
So I actually read that he's 14. Whoa. And he lied about his age to get into the movie.
All right, so even younger than I thought. But he looks very young, and I didn't actually recognize that it was him until I was searching it on my phone. Like, as I was watching, I was like, who is that? Because I could tell he looked familiar, but it wouldn't come to my mind.
Yeah, the fact that he had hair just threw me so much.
Yeah, it's very strange. He's just a young dude in it. He does a good job. But yeah, those are kind of the names. Those are the names I recognize. Yeah. I don't know if there's anyone else.
I couldn't think of anyone else that stuck out to me.
Yeah. So a big cast. Yeah.
Let me see really quick. Let me double check. Yeah. No one else really stuck out.
Yeah. But even with them, I mean, a good solid cast, some big names, some very good actors. I was gonna say actresses as well, but no. The main cast is all men, which makes sense. Vietnam War, women weren't in the military yet.
The few female characters are basically victims of the war, or there is a scene where is it 2 Playboy bunnies?
Yeah, actually.
It was weird.
A few Playboy bunnies, which it was a strange scene. That's one of the things about the movie. I guess we can go into that. There were a lot of things about the movie that, especially when comparing it to the source material, that I was just like, what's happening right now?
Yeah.
What's going on, and why would this go in? And that was one of them when the Playboy bunnies showed up. It's nothing too explicit or anything like that, but it was just a weird scene. The opening was another one that I was like, what's happening right now?
So I kind of took that scene where it starts off with them bombing a forest / beach area, and then it moves into the scene where Martin Sheen is by himself in a hotel room, and he's basically just going crazy and doing all this weird stuff. He ends up punching a mirror, which actually happened.
Yes, he actually cut his hand.
Yes, and I took that as him waiting to be the equivalent of in the book where he's waiting around for an assignment when he first gets to the Congo, because like I said, he lands on the coast of Africa and in the book and just kind of is waiting around for an assignment, and it talks about how he goes stir crazy a little bit in the book. This is full crazy.
Yeah, he was not hiding the ball there. The opening scene is bizarre, but it really sets the tone of the movie. I think it's important that it went down the way it did, because it sets the tone, and you realize from minute one, that it's going to be kind of It's certainly not a happy film. Like, that would be a gross misrepresentation of the story or of the film. Yeah.
So, a lot of the movie, you have Martin Sheen doing voiceover work.
Yes.
Just so you can kind of get in his head. Another little fact about that is they had to go back and put that in later. Obviously, they had to put it in later. That's how you do voiceover work. But I think they did it after a test screening, and Coppola was just like, no one's going to understand this movie. And so they brought Martin Sheen back to record all of this voiceover work 3 years after he had filmed everything in the Philippines. But a big difference between the book, as you pointed out, was the end objective of getting Kurtz.
Yes.
Because in the movie, he's not about bringing Kurtz back. He's actually going to assassinate Kurtz. And the higher up, the brass, I guess, as some people call them, tell him you're going to go kill this Colonel Kurtz because he's gone off the rails.
He's gone rogue.
Yes, and he's basically doing his own missions without any regard for what we're trying to do here. And so they tell him you're going to kill him with extreme prejudice. So in the book, they want Kurtz dead. A lot of people in the company want Kurtz dead, but nobody's sending our main character up to kill him. He just happens to be the guy that's there when he dies. And I think that's because we took it from this imperialistic setting into this military setting, where if you want someone dead in the military, I think you can say, we want him dead. You don't have to be too coy about it. Though, granted, in your own ranks, that's a little different.
Yeah.
I did read that the U.S. military wasn't too happy about that in this movie when it came out. They were very adamant that they had never done any operation like that.
Yeah. Wink, wink. I'm sure.
Don't kill us, please.
Yeah, it's an interesting change because they could have made him like a prisoner of war. It could have been a rescue mission in the movie.
Yeah,
they very easily, I think, could have done that, but they decided to turn it into an assassination, and so that was a very big main difference between the two, which I found interesting.
So, like I was saying, with the whole presence of Kurt's voice, like I said, I thought it was going to be a lot of voiceover from Marlon Brando and not Martin Sheen's character the way it is in this movie, because I was like, how are you going to get Kurt's voice throughout the rest of his story? And they were able to get his voice and make his presence felt even before you actually see him throughout the whole movie, and they do it in this, what I think is a really cool way.
I agree.
They hand him a dossier on Kurtz, and it basically gives him all this information, and it has a bunch of recordings from Kurtz as well that has a bunch of Kurtz ramblings.
He's like a pseudo-philosophical kind of thing. He definitely, I don't know which came first, his own feelings of grandeur or the people
grandizing?
Or the people's feeling of grandeur towards him. Because in both tellings, in the original and the movie, he does kind of have these people kind of worship
that
him.
Beast.
Yeah. So I wonder if he got these self-aggrandizing tendencies already, or if it was the people that wore off on him. But he certainly came off as thinking very highly of himself in the movie.
So I just thought of this. What if it's from neither of those, but from the people who originally brought him there? Because the company gives him a lot of praise in the book, and the military said that he was
prodigy.
that he was supposed to be this great guy, and they were all just super impressed with him until he went rogue.
Yeah.
And kind of the same thing with the company in the book. Everyone just freaking loves how much ivory he's doing. Like, he's doing his job.
Quite well.
Yeah. It's just, there are people that don't agree with how he's doing it in both cases. So I think the that narcissism is first fed from the people who bring him to this foreign country, whether it's Africa or Vietnam.
Yeah, I think that's a good thought on it, because it talks about in the movie, it really, I think a little more than the book. In the movie, it really shows how quickly he moved through the ranks in the military. Like, he was young, he moved up quick, and when he got older, he wanted to go to parachuting school.
Yeah, it's not parachuting school.
No,
but
it's not.
I have a brother who's trying to get into that. I should know what it's called.
Anyway, he wants to jump out of planes with a gun, basically. But he's too old, and so the military, and it's not the direction that a normal person in his situation would go.
I think in the movie there's someone mentions, like, they tell him, if you go to this school, you forfeit any chance of becoming a general. And I think they say his reply is, why would you want to be a general when you can be in the field, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's a huge paraphrase, if any. Not quoted.
But basically.
Yes.
Yeah, and so he decides to go a different route. He wanted to be out in the field. And he had to try 3 times, but he eventually got into that school. So that kind of shows his clout as well, that they were willing to do that, even though it's not what would normally be done.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. The way that they got Kurt's voice into the movie before Kurt said anything, or we saw Kurt's, I think they did a great job, and they did it through the dossier and through Martin Sheen's voiceover work. They were able to really insert Kurt's quite well.
So we kind of talked about this before we started recording, but the difference in the objective with Kurt's, one being to kill him and one to bring him back, I think that goes towards the thing that it's trying to overtly criticize, which with one it's imperialism and the other it's this militarism. That's not a word, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
That was prevalent through the according times. And I think that's because when you dig down deeper into what the story is about, it's about the inner darkness that exists in all men. And in both main characters, in Marlowe and Williams, or Willard. Marlowe and Willard, there's them basically having to come to face with it and accept it. But in the late 1800s, you would have to go into an imperialistic overtake of a different country in order to have the same sort of experience that Willard does in the mid-1900s with Vietnam. So even though, like, there are those big differences, I think it comes from understanding what the root of the story is really about.
Yeah, which is that inner darkness.
Yes, that inner darkness, and also kind of pushing it up against the society's true darkness, trying to pretend like it's upholding the right thing, which a lot of the military guys are especially Duvall's character talks about, you know, oh yeah, we're definitely doing the right thing here, and then turns right around and bombs a beach so that he can go surf there.
Yes. Yeah. That's a very good point. Yeah. So, yeah, I like that. The story on its surface is a decent story. It'd be a fun adventure story, intense and crazy. But when you get deeper into the philosophical and the psychological story, that's when it like really means something. And I think that's why we're still reading the book today, and we're still watching the movie. The movie's 40 years old, and I'm still watching it because of the deeper stuff.
And I understand that there's people who have criticisms of both the book and the movie, saying that it's glorifying imperialism or it's glorifying the military, because if you're doing a military story to criticize something that you think is going on with the military, it's really easy to just be a military story to someone who doesn't want to see that criticism. And same with the imperialism side of it. It's not metacritical, I don't think, but it's really easy to still be it still seem like you're grandizing something if you're not willing to see some of the spaces in between.
Yeah.
That being said, I still love the smell of napalm in the morning, and it's a great line.
It is a great line. It is a great line. And yeah, both stories kind of look at the human side of all of these things and the dark side, the monster side of these things. So it's like, it's interesting to remember, like some of the characters do, that on both sides, in both stories, that they're just humans, they're just people. And in both cases, there are some people that are taking advantage of and some people that are being taken advantage of. But either way, on both sides, the characters realize at some point that everyone's just human. So.
And their darkness, the darkness is in you. It's not in like your background, which I think a lot of the characters try to make themselves feel better about their own darkness by saying, well, it's their fault for being where they're from, and and just simply not the case.
Yeah. So having watched the movie first, I was very interested to see kind of reverse engineering how it was shown in the book, the stuff that I saw in the movie. Because I knew obviously the book came first by 100 years or whatever. See how the movie had incorporated the themes of the book, and I think they did a great job.
Yeah.
And I was kind of thinking in reverse about it because I saw the adaptation first. Had to kind of see it in reverse, but we've already talked about a lot of this, but the way that they show Kurtz's voice, the way they kind of set the mood and the tone, the stuff.
Also, well, so there's also the scene where they get attacked on the boat. Instead of bows and arrows, well, they do have a bows and arrows scene at one point, but there's also a point where they get attacked by a bunch of flares from the brush, and they don't see who that is. And that was kind of a cool modernization of that scene, I think.
Yeah, I think so as well. I thought that was really good. So kind of one other difference. It's not a huge one, not as big as some of the other ones, but the Russian that's been with Kurtz for a while in the interior of the Congo. In the movie, it's
Dennis Hopper's
character, but he's actually an American journalist. And he's there to cover the war, and I don't remember exactly how he ended up with Kurtz.
I don't know either. He's tripping on something, like the whole...
very frantic, and he's been completely taken in by Kurtz's mindset and the way he thinks, and he's the one that's just like, being around Kurtz changes the way you look at the world. It changes your thought process. He's like... he's big, he makes you think big, and he's very eccentric in the movie, and I thought he did a good job.
I love how, so there's a scene where he's explaining to Martin Sheen's character, like, you don't understand what he's trying to explain to you, and he's going to change the way the world thinks, and he goes off on this whole tangent about physics and how you can't land on a fraction or something like that. And
very strange.
While he's going on about it, Kurtz, Marlon Brando, throws a book at him and calls him a mutt. And I think it's because Kurtz is hearing his own words back and just wants to kind of reject it. Because I think one of the cool things with how they explain Kurtz teaching everyone is that everyone kind of comes out with a different take on what he's trying to say, which usually would not be good teaching.
Yeah.
But maybe it's just that character who gets way too deep into it. But yeah, he's an interesting character, to say the least. He the way he talks is kind of like a sped up Leo from That 70s Show.
Yeah.
Tommy Chong's character from That 70s Show. If you sped him up, that would be Dennis Hopper's character in Apocalypse Now.
He does really good. I like his character. Although it's kind of weird, and he's definitely like sycophantic towards Kurtz.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting retelling of the story. At the end, there is a strange part where they actually show a cow getting butchered.
And
strange.
it's a real cow that you see. If you're watching this before you watch the movie, I'm doing this as a bit of a PSA. Yes. It's a little bit rough.
It's a little rough. It is.
It seemed fake to me though, just because I was like, there's no way that's real. There'd be so much more blood. And then you're the one who told me that.
I did a little research on it because I was like, gosh, that is shocking. And it was actually, it's a ceremony that the people in the Philippines where they filmed it, it was actually a ceremony that they do, every so often. I don't know too much about it, but they were going to do it while they were filming. So they're like, let's just film this.
I heard that Coppola saw them do it and asked them to recreate it for the movie.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. PETA has condemned this movie for that scene. So if, you get your ratings from PETA.
Yeah, don't watch the movie, I guess. But
I'm sure that watching.
I'm sure that the cow fed the entire village. I'm sure it's something like that. But it is a little shocking and it's a little rough. But overall, great movie. The first time I watched it, I think I would have had a different opinion. I think I talked to you about it.
Really?
Yeah. It was just so. I don't know. I just couldn't really get what was happening. I don't know. I feel like an idiot now because I fully understand. But the first time I watched it, it was just, it's long and it's heavy.
Like 3.5 hours, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very heavy. There's not even a moment of levity in the whole thing. So it's heavy. It weighs down on you.
Yeah.
But after I read the story and watched it again, I liked it a lot more.
So, having read the story first, one thing that I appreciated about the movie is that the characters on the boat, who isn't the main character, we get a little bit more fleshed out with them.
Yes.
They aren't just stock characters for something to happen to, kind of like how they are in the book. We talked about Lawrence Fishburne and how great he is in that movie. His character is great as well.
Yes.
There's a part where they're able to pick up some mail from home, and Lawrence Fishburne has an audio recording from his mom, and he starts playing and listening to it, and he's just so excited to go back home, and that's when they get attacked, and he dies while the recording is still playing, and that was probably one of the most chilling moments for me.
It really was. It was really in a terrible way, a really beautiful scene. It was just done so well, and it got the point across impeccably. That I had to love the scene while it also made me feel terrible because it's very sad. And it's a heavy part.
Another thing that surprised me from reading the book first was how we see nothing outside of Vietnam, because we talked a lot about how he returns to Europe and how we see how he's changed, and I kind of wanted to see that in the movie, but we don't get that. It ends right where Kurtz dies, in accordance with the book, and we don't get those little wrap up rushed scenes that we get in the book. So
so how would you do it different if you were going to make this movie?
So
modernize it, I guess.
Yeah. So, like we talked about, there's in both of them, they're taking something that society has kind of said is okay, but we're also well aware is not, like imperialism or the military, the way the military was during Vietnam. And I can't think of a modern day equivalent.
How we would modernize it.
Just to get that juxtaposition between our hero facing their own darkness and seeing the people around them not face theirs. Again, Kurtz's voice being so prevalent in the story. And so I kind of was thinking you need someone with that voice. I don't think Brando has that voice that can cut to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I kind of thought of Sam Elliott, but he's a little bit on the older side for what I was thinking. I did also think of Joe Rogan, just because he does his podcast, and it's a huge podcast, and he's known for his voice. but he's also very adamant about how he thinks he's not the greatest actor, and I wouldn't want to put him in such a heavy role.
Yeah, but it's a good point. Like the character's literal voice and his not literal voice both need to be very commanding, right? And need to be able to be prevalent in the story before you see or meet these people. And I think that'd be the hard thing, because writing an adventure story or a journey story where a group of people have to get from point A to point B, that's not as hard as having the underlying story, the important part of the story.
So on that journey note, I think if someone wanted to do this today, they would be like, oh, they did Vietnam, we could do Desert Storm. And I don't think it would work. One, because where would you put a boat in Desert Storm? But also, the way modern military works, there isn't a chance for a journey like this. No. There's a lot of planes dropping you off to where you need to be. If I'm wrong about that, someone in the military can let me know and call me an idiot. But like, I don't know if there would be an equivalent of a journey like this that you could do in a Desert Storm kind of setting.
Yeah.
And I also don't feel that the criticisms that you could make about Vietnam apply the same way that you could with Desert Storm. You might disagree with that, but it's they're different. Different things.
My thought when we were kind of talking or thinking about how we could modernize it or tell it again was would be take it like science fiction kind of route, because obviously any sort of space travel, it's going to take time. There's a chance for other I don't know, space bandits to like kind of, you know, board the ship. And
when you first told me you were thinking like a sci-fi future thing, I was first picturing something like 2001: A Space Odyssey, where there's not space bandits, or so you're thinking more like a Star Wars.
Well,
Star
I don't
Trek.
know. I don't know.
Okay.
But really what made me think of that is there would be a long amount of time in a confined space, and there could be, you know, the main character, the Martin Sheen's character, and then 4 or 5 other guys, and mix in some women. It wouldn't have to be all men like it is in the Vietnam War, obviously.
Exactly.
But I think a lot of what could bring tension would be the close quarters, which I think it does on the boat in both cases, but it's shown a little more in the movie. The characters really start to get on each other's nerves. They see things differently. They think through things differently, and I think that would be a lot of tension in a spaceship or a spacecraft of some sort. One
thing that with the spaceship idea that you could possibly do that you couldn't do with Apocalypse Now is, and it would bring it closer to the source material, is have someone on the ship and maybe a couple people who are from the planet they're heading to. Because in the book they have a lot of people on the ship are members of the
native Congolese.
Yeah, they're native to the Congo. And you can't do that with this Vietnam story. You can't have like, yeah, we have a couple Viet Cong guys coming with us. Like
a couple of the enemy right here with us.
Yeah, it wouldn't
try
work.
To get along. Yeah, that's a good point. You could get back a little bit more to the source material in that regard.
And if you wanted, in regards of getting to Kurtz, you could go the Apocalypse Now route, or you could go the Heart of Darkness route.
Yeah, a rescue mission or a assassination mission.
Yeah, there's a lot more to play with there.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, if I was going to write another adaptation of Heart of Darkness, that's probably where I'd try to take it.
Yeah.
But
see, I tried thinking of a road trip idea, but the stakes seemed way too small to try and pair it with the story. And I mean, the story is more about the person's personal journey into facing their own darkness. So you could do it like that, but it would seem a lot smaller compared to the source material and Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, both of them, like the consequences are dire in both cases.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it'd be hard to kind of get that across, but those are just some ideas. It's fun to think about, you know, how you do things differently. So,
do you have any cast members you put on the spaceship? I would say Idris Elba should be one of them because I think he should be in everything.
Yeah, sure, I agree. I like him. There isn't anyone that really like jumped out to me. I mean, there are actors that I like to watch in movies, which if I was gonna make a movie, it'd be cool to have them in it.
Dude, Idris Elba could be Kurtz. He's got the voice.
He does.
We solved my conundrum.
There we go. Idris Elba. Let's do it.
Hit me up.
I don't know. I couldn't really think of anyone though that I thought had to play a particular role. But I'll think about it more. I'll let you know.
Okay.
So
maybe we'll let you know.
Yeah, perhaps.
So, wrap it up with our age-old question.
Yeah.
Which was better? This one, it's so unfair to even try to.
It's hard.
Just because, Apocalypse Now is an adaptation of Heart of Darkness, but to compare them is...
That's hard.
It is. And I think that's why we wanted to do this one. Like we said on the last one, we don't want to do Hunger Games every time. We're not against it, but, I think these bring about a much more interesting conversation.
Yes. Those are a page-by-page adaptation, whereas they've obviously done big changes. Which is what we're more interested in. So it does make it a little harder to say which one is better, which one you liked more. Because I don't know, they both convey they both convey the message.
Yeah. I would say I'm going to lean towards Heart of Darkness.
Okay.
And I'm going to do it for two reasons. One, it's a little bit less bizarre.
Okay.
Coppola's Apocalypse Now, maybe it's just the Doors music playing, but it has a much more psychedelic feel to it. And I understand that's for the time period, and I get that. I also am not constantly just thinking about the terror that the person that made it went through while I'm reading the book, as opposed to the movie. It's constantly just thinking of like this sucks. Not the movie itself, but like the making of.
As you're watching it, you can just feel the pressure of making it.
Yeah.
It's a terrible thing.
And my other thing would be going back to the fact that we see the changed character going back to society.
Yes.
And how they've changed. And I really liked that. And I think for either whatever adaptation I would come up with, I would make sure that was in.
They went back to point A.
They went back to point A, and we see the change in them.
Yeah.
The classic hero's journey.
I think I'll agree.
Okay.
For those reasons, as well as I just really like that time period as far as literature from that time period. I like the way it's written. I liked the way they spoke back then. I think it's great. One thing that I think the movie did better that I will throw in as well is the character development of those on the boat.
Yeah.
Not everyone on the boat in the book, but most people on the boat in the book they're just there. They're just people that are there because you need a certain amount of people to run a ship up a river.
Yeah.
So they're there. But in the movie, you really get to know the characters a lot better. So I will add that, but I think overall I like the book more. The novella, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's fairly short.
Yeah. 70 pages?
I think so.
70, 80.
It's I don't want to say it's a quick read, even though it's 70, 80 pages. It's fairly dense, but it's a good read, and I highly recommend it. I recommend the movie. Yeah. I'm going to try and track down that documentary.
Yes, both of them are heavy. The movie is 3.5 hours. It feels like 5 or 6, to be honest.
I think we had to take 2 separate viewings to watch it at that time. Yeah.
So, but it is good. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Thanks for watching. Of course, all the normal stuff. Leave a comment, like, share.
Subscribe if you haven't.
Yeah. This, as we mentioned last episode, is something we're just starting up. We would love to keep doing it. It's something we like doing anyway, and we'd like it if you guys like it. So let us know how we can do better, how we can make it more interesting, more enjoyable for you guys. But thanks for watching.